We continue now at the top of Daf. We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 42a. On the previous Amud, there was a machlokas Amoraim. Until when can we say Kiddush Levana? One opinion was until the 7th day of the month. The other opinion was until the 16th day of the month. And the Gemara now explains V'tarvayu Reb Yochanan Svira Lahu. Both opinions hold like Reb Yochanan. Hala Mahavi Ki Yisra, Hala Mahavi Ki Nafya. In one case, we wait until the moon looks like it has the string of a bow, and in the other case, we wait until the moon looks like a sieve. And Rashi explains V'tarvayu Reb Yochanan b'milsei Reb Yochanan pligi. What we mean to say is that they're both arguing within what Reb Yochanan said. V'ad shenismalei svira lahu. They both agree that you can do Kiddush Levana until the flaw of the moon is filled. That's what Reb Yochanan said. The question just is, what does that mean? Miu Reb Yehuda savar. Nevertheless, Reb Yehuda, he holds miloi pigi masa dekama Reb Yochanan. When Reb Yochanan says you can say Kiddush Levana until the flaw of the moon is filled, lemahavi ki yisra dehavoi kimo yeser shel keshes. That means that the moon, it looks like it has the string of a bow. Shetei kol pegimas hakeshes maleya, that the entire flaw of the bow is filled. Ad hayeser, until the string. Dahainu chatzi ha'ikol. That's the same way as saying that the moon should look like a half a circle. Essentially, what Rav Yehuda is saying is you can say Kiddush Levana until you see the half moon. That's what it means that you're seeing the string of the bow. That's until the 7th of the month. V'haila sof shivahu. That's at the end of the seventh day of the month. V'nahardoi savri nahardoi. They're the ones that say until the 16th. They hold miloi pegima dekam Reb Yochanan. When Reb Yochanan says it's until the flaw of the moon is filled, adid have kinafia, the moon should look like a sieve. That just means agula b'miliusa. That means to say that it's round, that it's a full moon. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravacha mi Difti le Ravina. Ravacha from Difti said to Ravina, V'livrach hatov v'hametiv. Why do we make a bracha on the moon of hatov v'hametiv? Because we benefit from the light of the moon. Amar le, he said back to him, Atu ki chaser, but when the moon is diminishing, mi mevarchinon dayan ha'emes. Do we make the bracha of dayan ha'emes when the moon is diminishing? Delivrach hatov v'hametiv, that when the moon is waxing, that we would then say that we should make the bracha of hatov v'hametiv? That doesn't make sense. If you're going to say hatov v'hametiv when the moon is getting fuller, you should say the bracha of dayan ha'emes when the moon is getting smaller. Of course, we don't do that. The Gemara says, why not? Why don't we say both brachas? We should say Hatov HaMeitiv at the beginning of the month. We should say Dayan HaEmes towards the end of the month. And the Gemara answers to that, Kevan Dahainu Orche, since this is all normal, natural way of the moon, Lo Mevarchina, we don't make a bracha on that. And Rashi explains, V'livrach Hatov HaMeitiv, why don't we make the bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv ad Rav Yehuda Parach? Rashi says, this question is specifically on Rav Yehuda, who says that you do Kiddush Levan until the 7th. Nihi nami de mishiva Granted that from the 7th day and onward we can't say Mechadesh Chadashim because the moon is not new, but Livrach Mia Hatov HaMeitiv. What he's asking is at least we should make the bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv at that point, Shekol Shahu Meitiv Lanu B'Milius Atamid, because it's getting fuller and that's always something better for us. Shemosefes Lahar Leolam, it's bringing more light to the world. So essentially the Gemara is asking, granted that you can no longer, according to Rav Yehuda, make the bracha of Mechadesh Chadashim, but at least you should make Hatov HaMeitiv. So he responded, when the moon is getting smaller, do we think that's something that's bad? It's bad for us that we're now going to make a bracha of dayan ha'emes. Then we're going to consider that when it's getting full, that's a good thing. That will make the bracha of hatov ha'meitiv. The Gemara then said, well, why not? Why not make both brachas dayan ha'emes b'chesrona v'tov ha'meitiv b'miliusa? We should say the bracha of dayan ha'emes when it gets smaller. We should say the bracha of tov ha'meitiv as it's getting fuller. And the Gemara answered, Dahainu Orche, that's just natural. B'chol chodesh brias olam kimin hagohi, that's just the normal way of the world. Ve'in kan din poranas b'chesrona, we don't consider things that are the natural way of the world a punishment when it's getting smaller. V'lo hatavasol lanu chesed b'milios, and we don't consider it to be something that is a chesed for us, that's something good when it's getting fuller. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Ravacha bar Chanina, Amar Ravasi, Amar Rav Yochanan, and Ravacha bar Chanina says that Ravasi says that Rav Yochanan says, Kol ha'mevorech ala chodesh bezmano, anyone who makes a bracha on the new moon in its proper time, Ki'ilu mekabel pnei shchina, it's like receiving the face of the shchina. Ksiv hacha, it's written over here, hachodesh hazeh, he uses the word hazeh when it talks about the new moon. Uksiv hasam, and it's written over there, zeh keli v'yanveyu, this is my God, and I will glorify him, using the word zeh, so we understand that it's Ki'ilu mekabel pnei shchina. And the Gemara continues, Tana devei Rabbi Shmuel, they taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel Ilmoli Zochu Yisrael Lahakbil Pnei Avian Shabashamayim Kol Chodesh V'Chodesh Dayim. If Klal Yisrael was just Zocha to receive the face of their Father in heaven every single month, that would be sufficient. And the Gemara continues. Amar Abaya. Abaya says Hilkach Neimrinu Mu'umid. For that reason, therefore, we should say the bracha of Kiddush HaChodesh standing up, because it's like Mekabel Pnei Hashchina. And the Gemara continues. Mereimar Umar Zutra Mechasvi Umavarchi. Mereimar and Marzutra, it was difficult for them to stand, so they would be held up by shoulders, by people's shoulders, and they would make the bracha in that way. Amar le Ravacha le Ravashi. Ravacha said to Ravashi, B'ma'arova Mavarchi, in the west, in Eretz Yisrael, they make the following bracha on the moon, Baruch Mechadesh Chodashim. It's an abridged version of the bracha. They just say, Baruch Mechadesh Chodashim. Amar le, so he said back to him, Hai Nashi Didon, Nami Mavarchi. That's how our women, that's how they make the bracha, because they're not able to make the long bracha. But the proper bracha is as follows. Elakid Rav Yehuda, rather, the proper bracha is like Rav Yehuda says. The Amar Rav Yehuda says, Baruch Asher B'ma'amaro B'rosh Shachakim, Uvaruach Piv Kol Tzva, Chok Uzman Nasan Lohem, Shelo Yishanu Es Tafkidam, Sasim Usmechem La'asus Ritzon Konam, Po'ale Emes Shepulasan Emes V'lalavona Amar Shetischadesh, Ateres Tiferes Lamuzei Voten, Shem Asidin Leschadesh Kemoso Lafar Liyotzram, Al Shem Kavod Malchuso Baruch Ato Hashem, Mechadesh Chodashim, and this is essentially the bracha that we make at Kiddush HaChodesh. And Rashi explains, Dayan, again, it would be sufficient if Klal Yisrael would just be able to be Mekabel Pnei Avian Shabashamayim Kol Chodesh V'Chodesh. Rashi says, Ilu lo zachu l'mitzvah acheres, if there was no other mitzvah that they merited, Ela lazu, except for this mitzvah, Shemekabel Pnei Shechina, to receive the face of the Shechina, Pamachas B'Chodesh, once a month, Kid Amron B'Gzer Shava, like we said, using the Gzer Shava, that the idea of Kiddush HaChodesh is Mekabel Pnei Shechina, that again would be sufficient. And Rashi continues, Amar Abaya says, Ho'ol Mekabel Pnei Shechina hu Me'umad Boi Levruche, since you're being Mekabel Pnei Shechina, you should make the bracha standing up, and make Kvod Shechina Shu Mekabel, because of the honor of the Shechina that he's receiving. Tafkidem, and then the actual text of the bracha is Shelo Yeshanu Es Tafkidam, rather means Mitzvah Shetzivisam Lehisnag B'Hilach Tekufosayim. It means that they were commanded, the moon, the sun, and the moon were commanded to go in the way that they're supposed to go, and they do exactly what they are commanded. Sasim Usmechem, they rejoice. Kedechsiv Yosses Kegibor. Po'alei Emes Shein She'enam Meshanim Esidram. Po'alei Emes means also they do what is true. They don't change from the natural order of what they're supposed to do. V'lalavona Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shetischadesh B'chol Chodesh, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to the moon to become new every month. Ateres Tiferes Hizu, this is a Tiferes, it's like a glory la'amusei voten. This means from those who are from the womb, Simen hu lahem. It is a siman for them. Sha'af heim shemonim la asidim l'schadesh. Also those who count their calendar by the moon, they also will be renewed. Meaning Klal Yisrael will be renewed. Begalusan kemoso lafar liyotzram. They'll be renewed in the sense that they will be redeemed. And we will note over here a slightly different text in Rashi from the Bach, Divrei HaMaskal Ateres Lehischadesh, not Begolusan, but Lehischadesh Bigdulasan, Kemosa Ulafar, that again they're going to be renewed in their greatness like the moon. And the Gemara continues, the Pasuk says in Mishlei Ki B'sach Bulos Ta'asa L'cha Milchama, that with wise strategies you make war. And the Gemara darshans the Pasuk, Amar Rav Acha bar Chanina, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yochanan. Rav Acha bar Chanina says that Rav Asi says that Rav Yochanan says, B'mi ata motzi milchamta shel Torah, among whom can you find the war of Torah, those who are able to argue in Torah, who's able to do that? B'mi sheyesh biyado chavilos shel Mishnah, only among those who someone who has within his possession chavilos shel Mishnah, which is bundles of Mishnah. Only when you have a lot of knowledge of Mishnah can you then engage in arguments in terms of learning. That's what it means. Tachbulos is referring to chavilos shel Mishnah, and the milchama over here is referring to the milchamta shel Torah. And the Gemara continues, Kari Rav Yosef Anavshe, Rav Yosef called this about himself, also a pasuk in Mishlei V'Rav Tevuos, B'koach Hashor, there's an abundance of crop by the strength of the axe, because Rav Yosef also, he had an abundance of knowledge and was able to engage b'milchamta shel Torah. And Rashi explains milchamta shel Torah, the war of Torah, Hori Yosef, V'lamor al Borya V'alikar, in order to really understand and to really be able to issue rulings, Lo Ka'adam HaMefulpol U'Mechuda, not just a sharp person who Baal Svara, someone who's able to make logical arguments, V'lo Lamad Mishnayis of Braisas Harbe, that person who might be very sharp, but if he didn't learn a lot of Mishnayis and Braisas, how is he going to be able to reveal any secrets? Ela bebal Mishnayis Harbe, it's only going to work if somebody knows a lot of Mishnayis. If he needs a reason over here, he can learn it from some other Mishnah. Let's say he has a question, one thing against another, he can understand from the many Mishnayis that he knows, Hamani Plonihi, that Mishnah is following so-and-so, Sheshamanu b'makom acher or merkach, that we heard of in a different place, he says as follows. So you need to have a lot of knowledge in order to be able to explore those questions. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Echad Omer b'shtei shos v'chulu, if one says in the second hour of the day, and the other one says in the third hour of the day, that's considered to be congruent testimony. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Shimi Barashi says, Lo shanu el shos, that's only true if it's this difference in hours. Aval Echad Omer kodem hanetz hachama, but let's say one would say that it happened before hanetz hachama, before sunrise. V'echad Omer la'achar hanetz hachama, the other one says that it happened after hanetz hachama, after sunrise. So then already that's such a discrepancy. A dusan betela. There we say the testimony is nullified. The Gemara says pshita. Well, that's obvious. We don't even need to teach that. And the Gemara says ella. Rather, what we teach is as follows: Echad Omer kodem hanetz ve'echad Omer besoch hanetz. Even if one says but it happened before hanetz, and the other one says it happened during hanetz, during sunrise, that also is considered to be a legitimate discrepancy, and we say that the testimony is nullified. The Gemara says hanami pshita, but that also seems obvious. Those are, again, it's obvious to be able. It's easy to make the distinction between before sunrise and during sunrise. And the Gemara says not necessarily. What might you have said? The person who said that it happened during sunrise, really what happened was he was standing in an exposed area. He just saw a shine, he just saw a little bit of light. He thought that it was the sunrise, but really it was before sunrise. So maybe you would say that kind of discrepancy is something that does not nullify the testimony. Kamash Malan, that's what it's teaching us, that is considered to be nullified testimony. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, and the Mishnah went on to say that if a student said a reason why we should acquit, so we would bring him up to the place of the judges and he wouldn't descend from there all day. And the Gemara says, Oso Hayom Vesulo is just all day and no more than that. He wouldn't get to stay there for longer. But then we learn in the Braisim, Yesh Mamish B'Dvarav, if what he said had substance, Lo Hayayored Misham Liolam, he actually wouldn't descend from there forever. And the Gemara continues, Vim Ein Mamish B'Dvarav, the Brisa continues, if there's no substance, so Ein Yored Kol Hayom Kulo, then he would not descend the entire day. Kedei Shelo Tehei Aliyah, so you read the law. We don't want that his ascent should be like a descent, meaning to say it would be humiliating if you would make him go down that very same day, even in a situation where there was no substance to what he was saying. And the Gemara says, Amar Abai says, Tirgama, you should interpret the Mishnah which says he stayed there all day, im ein mamish b'dvarav. That's going on a case where there was no substance to what he said, then he just stays there for the rest of the day. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Matzu lo zechus v'chulu, and the Mishnah went on to say that they wouldn't drink wine, the judges would not drink wine that whole day. And the Gemara says, Yain my time below, what's the reason not to drink wine? Amar Rabbi Acha bar Chanina. Rabbi Acha bar Chanina says, Amar Krutz, because the pasuk says, V'la roznim e shecher. It says, for the princes there is no shecher, there's no intoxication. And we darshan that to mean, we understand that to mean, ha'oskin barazo shalolam. Those who are dealing with the secrets of the world, like these judges, al yishtakru, they should not become intoxicated. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, and we'll take a look at the Bach's version of the Gemara over here. The Bach says that it should be quoting the Mishnah where it says, Don in elu keneged elu ad sheyira. We're talking here about a situation where they already added the maximum number of judges, and they were not able to reach a verdict, so it says that they would deliberate one with the other until some would change their mind to say innocent, and they would say innocent. And the Gemara says, lo ro mai, but what if they're not able to change anyone's mind? No one is changing from their opinion, and they're not able to reach a final verdict. Amar Rav Acha says, potrino, so in such a case, we exempt him, we exempt the defendant, we say he's innocent. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yochanan potrino, so Rabbi Yochanan says the same thing, we exempt him. Amar le Rav Papa li Abaye, so Rav Papa said to Abaye, v'lifterei meikar, if that's the case, so when it's undecided, we should exempt him right away. Why are we trying to convince people to change their minds? Amar le said to him, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, this is what Rabbi Yochanan says, Kadei shelo yatsumi bezin morvav, and we don't want them to leave bezin that there was a confused verdict. And the Gemara continues, Ika diamri, there are those that say, Amar le Rapapa li Abaya, Rapapa said to Abaya, V'lama li Yosifa, but if that's the case, why do we need to add any judges? Lifter mi beidina kama, simply say that he's exempt from that very first court. Amar Lei said to him, Rabbi Yossi kai kevasach. Rabbi Yossi actually goes like you. He agrees with that view. The Tanya, because we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Kashem shein mosifan al bezdin shel shivim v'echad. Just like we don't add on a court of 71, that's the maximum. Kachein mosifan al bezdin shel esrim ushlosha. We also don't add to a court of 23. If you have a situation where they don't reach a verdict, you simply say the person is innocent. And Rashi explains, Kadesh lo yetzumi bezdin mu'urvavim. Again, they shouldn't leave bezdin confused. Gnai lebezdin. It would be a disgrace for bezdin sheyotzu b'machlokas, that we should leave the court that everyone's arguing. Vein yodin ligmor asadin. They don't know how to reach a verdict. And the Gemara then said, V'lifterim beidina kama. Why not just do that from the first court? Lama mosif. And why even bother adding judges? Mishanechliku harishonim. When you have this split among that first court of 23, yadonu elu keneged elu. They should just deliberate one against the other. Imra echad me'elu. It's divrei elu. If somebody sees the other other one is right, Harei Tov, then that's good, they'll change their minds. V'im lav, and if not, if they don't reach a verdict, Yiftaru, then we should just say the person is exempt. And the Gemara again said that actually is Rabbi Yossi's view. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Omer b'dinei mamanis nizdaken hadin. When it comes to dinei mamanis, one can say nizdaken hadin, which the Gemara will explain in a moment. V'yein omer b'dinei nefashos nizdaken hadin, but we don't say nizdaken hadin when it comes to dinei nefashos, when it comes to capital cases. And the Gemara says, my nizdaken hadin. What does it mean nizdaken hadin? That we say that by monetary cases, and we don't say that by dinei nefashos. Ilema kashdina. If you're going to say what it means, is kashdina. Rashi says kashdina means zaken din. It's like an old case. Zakin din zev amuk v'kasha. It's old, it's difficult, but sarach lahamtin, but we need more time. So in other words, according to that, nizdakin hadin means that it's difficult to reach a conclusion and we need to take more time. But if that's the case, if that's what it means, that nizdakin hadin means we need more time. So by dinei mamanis, we're going to extend the case and not by dinei nefashos. Ibcha mi boile. It should be the exact reverse. We should be saying by dinei nefashos, nizdakin hadin or kashdina, and you need more time. As Rashi says, by capital cases, you need to look into it, you need to investigate it even more, and so therefore it would not make sense to say that nizdaken hadin means that the din is old and difficult and requires more time. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna bar Manoach mishmei de Rav Acha b'rei de Ravika. Rav Huna bar Manoach says in the name of Rav Acha, the son of Ravika, Epoch, actually you should reverse it. According to the understanding that nizdaken hadin means kashdina, so it's really by dinei nefashos that we say kashdina, that we say nizdaken hadin, that we want more time, and by dinei mamanis, you don't need to take more time. And the Gemara continues with another interpretation of nizdaken hadin. Rav Ashi says, Liolam lo sepech, you don't have to reverse anything. Umay nizdaken hadin, what does the word or the term nizdaken hadin means? What does it mean to say? Chacham dina, it means that the din is wise. Rashi explains chacham dina means yafehem manu al buryev. We've done a good job. V'yein echad mimenu tzarech lafich ledakdek bo. We don't need to look into this any further. So nizdaken hadin is a way of saying we don't need to extend the case. V'yein omrim kein b'dinei nefashos. We never say that by dinei nefashos. By capital cases, we never say that we've looked into it enough. Sha'af mishagamru, even once it's concluded, im yadakdek echad v'yimsa lo zechus machzir natzadin. If somebody would examine and find some kind of reason to say innocent, we would retract the ruling and we would actually come back to court in such a situation. And so therefore, again, according to that understanding, nizdaken hadin is a way of saying that the case should stop, and we never say that when it comes to dinei nefashos. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question on this from the following brayso, Gadol shebedayonin omer, the greatest of the judges says nizdaken hadin. He's the one that says nizdaken hadin. And again, we had two interpretations of what nizdaken hadin means. Either it means extend the din, or it means to say stop the case. So yamrid b'shlama chacham din. If you're going to say that it means chacham dina, that nizdaken hadin is a way of saying stop the case, so hainu damar gadol, it would make sense to say that the greatest of the judges says that. Eliyamrid kashdina, but if you're going to say that the din is old and requires more time, lo sagid lo amar gadol ksufehu to michsef nafshe, it's not sufficient that you shouldn't have the greatest say it. We have to embarrass the leader of this court, that the leader of the court says that this is too difficult and we haven't reached a verdict. Why should the greatest one of the courts say something that essentially is an embarrassment? If you're going to say that nizdaken hadin means kashdina, that's something that's embarrassing to say. And the Gemara says, yes, it does have to be the greatest one of the court to say it, because there's no comparison being embarrassed from himself than being embarrassed by others. It's really best that he himself should acknowledge that. And Rashi explains, Zeino dome tov hulo, it's better for him, for that greatest of the judges, that he should embarrass himself. Better to do that than have one of his friends say it, kashdina, one of his colleagues will say kashdina, because then he's going to have to be embarrassed from someone else. And the Gemara continues, Ika diamri, there are those that have another version of what exactly the question from the Brisa was, that it's actually the reverse. If you say that nizdaken hadin means kashdina, means it's a difficult case, it's an old case that needs more time, that would make sense. We would say that it's not comparable to be embarrassed from oneself than to be embarrassed from others, and it would make sense that the greatest of the judges would say that. But if you're going to say that it means chacham dina, the din is wise, we've done a good job, we're ready to reach a verdict. So gadol ashbuche meshabech nafshi, are we going to say that the greatest of the judges should praise himself? But it's written, a stranger should praise you, it shouldn't come from your own mouth. So why, if it's chacham dina, why is the gadol shebedayonim, why is he the one saying that? And the Gemara answers, Shani milsa de veidina. It's different when you're talking about matters of the court. Da godol ramya. Really, everything falls upon the greatest of the judges. Kidetanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Gomru es adavar hayu machnisan osan godol shebedayonin. When they conclude the matter, they bring him in, and godol shebedayonin omer, and the greatest of the judges says, Ish ploni ata zaka, ish ploni ata chayiv. So and so, you're innocent, or so and so, you are guilty. Rashi explains that Godol Ramya va'afilu dvarim shel shevach hu, and even if it's something of praise, he's the one that's supposed to lead the proceedings. Hadron Allah Hayubodkin, we will return to you, Parak Hayubodkin. This is the end of the 5th parak of Meseches Sanhedrin. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will begin in the next video, the 6th parak of Meseches Sanhedrin, on Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis.